Imagine being on the brink of death, your heart faltering, your body slipping into the darkness of unconsciousness. This was the reality for me, David Reynolds, a man in my late 30s, on the morning of March 20th, 2021. I had no idea that this day would mark a turning point in my life. It all started when I collapsed at work, the result of years of pushing my health to the side, ignoring stress, late nights, and a lifestyle that finally caught up with me. The last thing I remember was the chaos around me, my coworkers shouting for help, calling 911, and then everything went black. When I woke up, it wasn't like any waking I had ever known. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating above it, watching the medical team work desperately to bring me back. And though I should have felt fear, there was only an overwhelming peace that washed over me. I wasn't alive anymore, but somehow I felt safe. Then something impossible happened. I felt his presence. It was Jesus. His appearance was beyond anything words could describe. Radiant, not blinding, but like a warm embrace that calms you to your core. His eyes, filled with compassion and understanding, met mine. It was as if he could see every part of me, the struggles, the regrets, the joys. Despite knowing everything about me, he looked at me with a love so pure it left me speechless. "David," he said, his voice filled with warmth, "you're not finished yet. I have something to show you." His words were so direct, so personal, I didn't know how to respond. But before I could process what he had said, the atmosphere around us began to shift. The serene calmness gave way to a new reality, an amphitheater of light. It stretched endlessly, and the very air seemed alive, vibrating with energy. Jesus turned to me, a look of anticipation on his face. "I'm going to show you what's coming in 2025, he said, his voice carrying the weight of something far greater than I could understand. "You're a part of a bigger plan, David. You need to see what lies ahead." And then he spoke the words that would forever change my perspective. "First, I will show you the great deception." Suddenly, the space around us grew heavy with dread. The very fabric of reality seemed to tremble. I saw the world unraveling as false teachings and lies crept into every corner of society, even inside the church. It wasn't happening in distant places, it was happening everywhere. I saw ordinary people, swayed by false promises of peace, enlightenment, and unity, all of it leading them further from the truth of Jesus. It was horrifying to witness the power of these lies growing stronger, convincing millions, even billions, that they were walking in truth when, in reality, they were lost in darkness. "Many will be deceived in the last days," Jesus said, his tone somber. "It will start small, but it will grow. Those who are not grounded in my word will be swept away." I saw people embracing New Age philosophies, believing that all paths led to God, when in truth they were straying further from the light. The more people searched for answers, the more confused they became. It felt like a cloud of deception was consuming the world. But just when the despair began to overwhelm me, Jesus whispered, "Watch." And then the scene before me shifted. A wave of light exploded, so bright it made the surrounding darkness seem insignificant. From this light, I saw people rising, a remnant of believers, those who had held firm to the truth of Jesus Christ, were about to experience something extraordinary. This was the Great Awakening. "Where darkness increases, my light shines even brighter," Jesus said, his voice filled with hope. The first scene of this awakening unfolded before me in a sleek, high-tech office in Silicon Valley. A young software engineer sat at his desk, surrounded by screens filled with complex code. He seemed lost in thought when suddenly his fingers froze on the keyboard. Tears began to stream down his face. In that moment, he knew. He had been working on artificial intelligence designed to replace human spirituality, but now he realized how wrong it was. Without hesitation, he fell to his knees, praising Jesus right there in his office, regardless of what his career or colleagues might think. Jesus turned to me, his eyes full of meaning. "Watch," he said again. This time I found myself in a university lecture hall. A professor known for her fierce atheism was at the front, mocking the idea of God. But then something miraculous happened. Mid-sentence, her hands trembled and she stopped. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Gripping the podium, she whispered, "I've been wrong. I've just encountered Jesus Christ. Everything I've taught you about religion being a delusion, I was the one who was deluded." I couldn't believe my eyes. All over the world, atheists, agnostics, skeptics were having undeniable encounters with Jesus. People from every walk of life were waking up to the truth. I saw it happening everywhere. In a mosque in the Middle East, hundreds of Muslims saw visions of Christ. In prisons, hardened criminals were breaking down in repentance. Executives in the entertainment industry abandoned projects that mocked faith. Government officials sought divine wisdom, and in hospitals, doctors and nurses witnessed healings that defied explanation. This was just the beginning of what I would witness, and I knew that what I had seen was just a glimpse of the extraordinary events to come in 2025. But with all that I saw, there was a cost. As I stood there, Jesus looked at me and his expression grew serious. "Observe," he said, and I knew something weighty was coming. What I witnessed was more than I ever imagined. Believers were being persecuted in ways that pierced my heart. Families were torn apart. Children were disowned for standing firm in their faith. Spouses abandoned each other. People lost jobs. Students were expelled. The world was in chaos, and the line between light and darkness had never been clearer. "There will be no more lukewarm faith," Jesus said, his voice firm with resolve. "No more casual Christianity. Every person will have to choose where they stand." I watched as this awakening spread across every barrier we know: age, culture, education, and social status. Rich or poor, young or old, people from all walks of life were encountering Jesus in a way that broke all human divisions. This was true unity, born from the Spirit, not from compromise. "Where there is humility," Jesus said, "my Spirit will move with greater power." In that moment, I saw something incredible. Young children and teenagers, those you'd never expect, were becoming powerful witnesses for Christ. They moved with spiritual authority, unafraid of the persecution that came their way. But I also saw the weight of the challenge they faced: being ridiculed at school, rejected on social media, torn apart by their own families. Jesus' words to me were full of compassion. The young ones who stay faithful in this time will be given special grace. They will face unique challenges, but they will also walk in unique authority. Then the scene shifted to underground church meetings, hidden in places where persecution was most severe. And despite the dangers, the believers' faces were filled with something unimaginable: joy. A supernatural joy that seemed to emanate from the very core of their beings. They had found something far greater than comfort, something more satisfying than any earthly security. They had found the presence of Jesus. "The persecution purifies my church," Jesus explained. "What the enemy means for harm, I use for greater glory." What came next was just as extraordinary. I saw how this awakening was transforming every aspect of society. Christian entrepreneurs in business were creating platforms that nurtured true, deep community. In the world of technology, new believers were developing tools that connected people in faith. Artists and musicians were creating works that carried God's presence in ways that changed hearts. Even in education, young people started prayer movements that spread like wildfire. Teachers, unafraid of the restrictions around them, began sharing their faith openly. This awakening was nothing like what we expected. It wasn't about building bigger churches or creating famous Christian figures. It was marked by humility, brokenness, and the supernatural unity of believers connected by the Spirit. True unity, Jesus said, is not the counterfeit unity offered by the deceivers. This is the unity of my Spirit, born of truth. But as with every shift, there was more. Jesus revealed to me the third event to come, the great shaking. The atmosphere around me became dense, almost suffocating, as I felt the ground beneath me tremble, not with a natural earthquake, but with something deeper, a spiritual unease. a shaking that would shake the very foundation of the world. Nations began to collapse, one after another, swept away by political instability, financial crises, and natural disasters. But this wasn't just a physical shaking, it was spiritual too. The values that the world had built its life on, its priorities, its trust in systems, were about to be tested in ways no one could anticipate. I saw governments around the world making decisions that promised peace but led only to greater chaos. The rich grew richer and the poor became even more oppressed. The gap between the two widened at an alarming rate. The false peace the world's leaders promised could not hold, and deep down, everyone knew it. But then the shaking became personal. I saw families, once united, now torn apart by division, disagreements over values, over beliefs, over the truth. Communities that had once stood together now found themselves in opposition, not just against each other, but against the very institutions they had trusted. And it wasn't just the world that was shaken. Believers, too, found themselves caught in the tremors. The world is about to experience a spiritual shaking that will test the hearts of every person, Jesus spoke to me. Those who have built their lives on anything other than me will find themselves unsteady. I saw people scrambling for answers, desperate for stability, clutching at anything they could. But the more they grasped, the more it slipped through their fingers. I saw families arguing, churches splitting, and people questioning the very foundations of their beliefs. There will be great deception during this time, Jesus warned. Many will be led astray by promises of security, of comfort, but these are false. Only those who seek the truth in me will stand firm. I saw people turning to false ideologies, trying to make sense of the chaos in their own understanding. Some even lost their faith, unable to reconcile the suffering they saw with the love of God. The pressure was immense, and it broke many. But as the shaking reached its peak, something new began to rise. A movement of the heart. It was a group of people who refused to be swayed by the chaos around them. These were the ones who had stood firm in their faith, who had built their lives on the unshakable foundation of Christ, and though they faced trials, they did not bend. It is in the shaking that my people are refined, Jesus told me. They will endure, and through their endurance, they will shine. And with that, Jesus revealed the fourth event that will unfold in 2025, the Great Harvest. I found myself standing in the midst of a vast field, stretching out as far as the eye could see. The field was ripe with golden grain, ready for harvest. It was a breathtaking sight, but there was an urgency in the air, a sense that time was running out. Jesus stood beside me, his gaze filled with longing as he looked out over the field. "The harvest is ready," he said, "but the workers are few." As he spoke, I saw people from all walks of life, different cultures, backgrounds, and nations, coming together to gather the harvest. But these were not the mighty or influential. These were the humble, the ordinary, those who had remained faithful to Jesus despite the trials they had faced. These were the workers of the great harvest. The harvest was not just about souls being saved, though that was a central part of it. It was a global movement, a spiritual awakening, a revival that would sweep across nations, even reaching the most remote corners of the earth. I saw missionaries entering countries where Christianity had been banned, preaching the gospel to people who had never even heard the name of Jesus. And I witnessed those people responding with overwhelming joy, as if they had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. "This is the great harvest," Jesus said. "There will be a time of revival before the end, a time when millions, even billions, will come to know the truth of my love." But this harvest would not come without challenges. I saw churches rising up, taking the lead, but I also saw persecution intensifying from every side. Governments would clamp down on religious freedom, and those who preached the gospel would face arrest, imprisonment, and even death. Yet, despite the opposition, the gospel spread like wildfire. It became a movement that could not be contained. "The great harvest will be a time of great joy," Jesus said, "but it will also be a time of great cost." Those who are faithful will endure, but they will be rewarded. Then, in an instant, he brought me to the fifth event, the Great Sifting. In this vision, I saw a massive separation, as though the wheat and the chaff were being divided by fire. The sifting process began with the great shaking and continued through the great harvest. As people responded to the gospel, they were faced with a choice to stand firm or to fall away. The sifting was a time of testing, where the true followers of Christ would be revealed. I saw people who had once been part of the church, who had once professed faith, but who now fell away. They were swept up by the winds of deception, their hearts hardened by the pressures of the world. Some turned to false ideologies, others to self-worship, and still others to hopelessness. The sifting process was not easy, but it was necessary. "Not all who call on my name will enter the kingdom," Jesus said. "The sifting will reveal those who have truly followed me, those who have remained faithful to the end." But within the sifting there was great joy as well. I saw those who remained faithful being refined by the fire, their hearts purified and their faith strengthened. It was as though they had been made into something even more beautiful by the trials they had faced. Their love for Christ burned brighter, and their determination to endure grew stronger. "The sifting is necessary," Jesus said. "It is through the fire that my people are made pure." Then the sixth event that Jesus revealed to me was the rise of the Antichrist. In an instant, I saw the emergence of a charismatic leader, one who would rise to power during a time of global crisis. This leader united nations, bringing about a false peace that deceived the masses. He was a master manipulator, able to convince people that he had all the answers. He was everything the world had longed for, a savior figure promising unity and prosperity. But behind this facade, there was darkness. I saw this leader standing before a massive crowd, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity. The people cheered for him, believing he was their Messiah. They worshipped him, not realizing they were worshiping the Antichrist. "Many will follow him," Jesus said as I watched this scene unfold. "But you, my people, must not be deceived. He is a counterfeit. He will bring destruction, not salvation." I saw many people, once faithful, turning to this leader, believing he had the answers. But those who remained faithful to Christ knew the truth. They recognized the deception, and even as the Antichrist's power grew, they stood firm, proclaiming the truth of Jesus. "The rise of the Antichrist will be one of the greatest tests of faith," Jesus said, "but my people will not be swayed. They will endure." At that moment, I knew with everything in me that everything I had seen, the great deception, the shaking, the awakening, the harvest, the sifting, and the rise of the Antichrist had all led to this one undeniable truth. Jesus was returning, and nothing could stop his victory. As I stood in the presence of Jesus, everything he had shown me began to settle deep in my spirit. The challenges the world would face in 2025 were immense, but the hope and strength of those who remained faithful to Christ would be unshakable. Suddenly, I felt myself being drawn back into my body. The peace that had filled me in his presence remained, now coupled with a deep sense of purpose. Jesus had shown me the path forward and reminded me that I was not alone. In a rush, I found myself back in the hospital room. The sterile air and the smells flooded my senses. My heart, which had been still, began to beat again. The medical team gasped in astonishment as my vital signs returned to normal. As I opened my eyes, I saw the concerned faces of my colleagues and the paramedics, but underneath their confusion, I could feel something new in me, something eternal. I had witnessed the future, the great deception, the awakening, the rise of the Antichrist. It was all real, and I was now responsible for sharing this message. The urgency to awaken others to the truth was clear. Jesus had entrusted me with this vision, and I could not ignore it. Where darkness increases, my light shines even brighter. His words echoed in my heart every day. I knew that despite the trials ahead, the light of Christ would guide us through the storm. The Great Awakening was near, and though many would be deceived, I wanted to stand firm with those who refused to be swayed by the lies. Looking ahead, I held on to one unwavering truth. Faith is about standing firm when everything falls apart. Jesus has already won, and nothing, not the deception, the shaking, nor the rise of the Antichrist, can change that. I pray that my near-death experience testimony inspires you to seek the truth, cling to the light, and share this hope with others. The time is short, and the harvest is near. Let us answer the call to work. We are not alone. His light is shining brighter than ever, and together we will endure.